Hi,
Hi, Archie.
how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you? Okay, well, we left off these 5 characters yesterday in quite a predicament. They have terror in the sky and danger in the depths of the ocean. What is the danger? Well, the danger is that they are running out of air and they need air to breathe. You remembered that they do have this water breathing potion that we thought maybe they might use. So we are going to find out if they use that. We also know that the problem in the sky, the terror in the sky, are these guys, the phantoms. These are hostile mobs, and there are 3 that are circling around above the ocean in the sky, waiting to dive down and cause some damage to one of the characters. So let's see how these 5 characters get out of this predicament. I like saying that word. I've said it a couple times. It is predicament. And we say predicament. Predicament. That's like a little problem that you are in and you have not come up with a solution for how to get out of it. Okay. So Morgan blinked twice, an action that brought up a menu. That's interesting. This must be a Minecraft thing. It says he blinked twice. So with your eyes, you can either wink with a W or blink with a BL. If you're winking, you only close one eye like this. Okay, that's a wink. But if you close both eyes, you're blinking. Everybody blinks many times a day without thinking about it. But it sounds like in Minecraft, if you blink 2 times in a row on purpose, 1, 2, it can bring up a menu that is going to show his health and hunger meters. This is how they spell this word in England, okay, British English. In America, we do not spell it R-E, we spell it E-R. But it is a bar that we are going to look at here. So it might look something like this. These hearts are showing your health. So if you got attacked by a hostile mob and took damage, then you might lose a few of the hearts. We have also learned that one way to get hearts back and to restore your health or to get it back again is to eat food. Over here, these are showing how hungry you are. So this is the hunger meter. The hearts are health. Up here, these shirts, they look like shirts. That is your armor, your protection. I believe this green bar down here is called the experience bar. And I believe in here, you would see your inventory. Here's another example. So number 1 is a crosshair. That's this. That's called a crosshair. Number 2 is called the armor bar. Those are these shirts, these gray shirts right here. Number 3 is the health bar. So that is these hearts that we talked about right here. All right, number 4 is the experience bar. So number 4 is this line right here. And I think the color would be green when it shows up. Number 5 is the inventory. So that's right here showing you the tools and things that you have to work with. number 6 is the hunger bar. So that is right here. I'm not sure if that's showing how hungry you are or how much food you have.
It is how much food you have.
Oh, okay. And then here in the ocean, because we can see this is underwater, there's the crosshair. And then this here, they call it the hot bar, but this is your inventory. But what I really want to show you is the oxygen bar. This is the air you have to breathe. So if we zoom in here, we can see the armor and the health and the hunger. But these air bubbles show your air, your oxygen. And we need air to breathe. And then down here, it's showing your inventory, you know, what you have to work with if you are making things. Okay, so he looks at his health and hunger meters. Those are full, but his air was already half gone. He took out a potion of water breathing, but before he could drink it, Ash swam in front of him and shook her head. So in English, we might say shake or shook your head or nod your head. Nod is up and down, that means yes. But if you shook your head or shake your head, that's back and forth, and that means no. So she cannot speak underwater. They do not have, you know, actually, this is so high tech, these VR headsets. I would think they would have microphones and earpieces and something that would let them speak to each other underwater, but they don't, and they can't. So she's just using her hands and her movement and her eyes, her body language, shaking her head to communicate. Morgan didn't understand. The potions were only a temporary solution. Temporary means they will not last for very long. They are not going to help completely, just for a short time. But he felt they were better than nothing, right? Better than nothing is something. But Ash gestured. A gesture is when you're using your hands. So you're trying to say something using your hands, not your words. Ash gestured for Morgan and the others to follow her. She pointed at something in the water, something moving. It was a great column of bubbles. Well, the word column makes me think of something that is used when building in architecture. So when you are designing what you want a building or a house to look like, sometimes they use something that looks like this. These are columns. Here you can see 4 columns. Here's an old building that has many columns going around the outside of it. You can even use columns when you are designing a house. This house has these 4 big columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the front of it, you can see some smaller columns back here. Here's 2, and here's 2 more. So columns can be used when you are designing a building or a house. But these columns are not hollow, which means there's no air or space on the inside of it. It's solid. But this is a column of bubbles. So we will have to see what this is like. The bubbles rose from a glowing orange square of magma on the sea floor. Let's take a look at that. Here in Minecraft, this is what magma looks like. I think this one is lava. Both of them are words that we use when we are talking about volcanoes. So the way it works in Minecraft, if you want to make a bubble column or a column of bubbles, you can either use something called soul sand or something called a magma block. So it says here in Minecraft, you can make bubble columns by placing magma blocks or soul sand underwater. Players, mobs, items, and other entities or things will be sucked down or pushed up by the bubbles, depending on which block is underneath. If you're using soul sand, it will push things up. If you are using a magma block, things will get sucked down. Here is a picture of a column of bubbles coming from a magma block. You can see the column of bubbles going up. Here you can see a column of bubbles from the soul sand and a column of bubbles from the magma. Now, what we just read says that if it's a column of bubbles with the soul sand, it will push you up. And if it is a column of bubbles from the magma, it will suck you down. So that is some good information for us to know about Minecraft. You can see I had a little note here about soul sand. The bubbles floated all the way to the surface, and inside the column of bubbles, dun, 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 they could breathe. Morgan took a big breath, then looked above and below him. In the light cast by the magma block, he could see the others had all made it safely to the bubbles. He could also see the shadows of the phantoms. They were still circling above the surface like hungry sharks. Now, the phantoms are not hungry sharks. The phantoms are bat-like. They're like bats, right? We can see here a phantom. This is not a hungry shark. They are saying that they are like hungry sharks. They're making a comparison. Remember that when we use this word like, we are making a simile, which will compare two things and show us how they are similar. The author picks the second thing to help us understand the first thing better. So the author wants us to know that these, whoops, hang on. So the author wants us to know that these phantoms are similar to a hungry shark. Well, how are they similar? A hungry shark, if it sees something in the water that it wants, maybe if it spots some blood or something that's hurt and it starts circling around it, it's probably not going to get bored and leave, right? It's going to stay because it's like, dinner. So up in the sky, the phantoms are circling around and they are probably not going to leave because they see these 5 characters as something they want to cause damage to, because that is what hostile mobs do. Morgan breathed a sigh of relief that there weren't any actual sharks in Minecraft. Of course, there were other underwater dangers, but it was best not to think about that right now. They needed a shelter. Remember, a shelter is a place that can keep you safe. It's a place that you can use to protect yourself or to hide, a place where you can feel safe. He swam over to, before I turn the page, you can see right here, Morgan is inside that column of bubbles and that lets him breathe. He swam over to Harper. She was the fastest builder. Okay, remember, we know that Harper she has memorized lots of the different recipes and formulas for making things using their inventory. And she's fast. and she usually remembered the recipes and formulas that Morgan forgot. He raised his hands. He tried to make his arms look like a triangular roof over his head. Okay, so here's the top of a triangle, and he tries to make it above his head. He's trying to show her a picture of, we want a shelter. We want something that we can go inside of and be safe. So he's trying to use his body language and his hands to gesture or to send the message, let's build a shelter. He's saying shelter. Now remember, he can't say this out loud. And so instead of using quotation marks, the author is using italics. Shelter, he thought at her. Because he's thinking and he's not speaking, we don't say he said to her. We say he thought at her. Come on, Harper, let's get building. Harper just gave him a blank look. A blank look means I don't understand. You know, it's not like, oh, I get it, no problem. It's like, huh? I don't get it. What do you want? She shook her head and shrugged. She's like, I don't know what you mean, right? She's showing with her body language, I don't know what you want me to do. I don't understand what you're saying to me. She couldn't understand him. Morgan decided now we have to decide if this is going to be he did, he had, or he would. He'd just have to do it himself. He did just have to do it, he had just have to do it, or he would just have to do it. It's this one. He would just have to do it himself. But he had precious few materials. That means he does not have very much in his inventory. He swam to the seafloor and began digging up dirt, then piling it to make the foundations of a house. So he's trying. It was taking forever. Each time he placed a few blocks, he had to return to the bubbles for more air. Finally, Ash seemed to realize what he was doing. She shook her head at him and gestured with her hands towards a nearby wall of rock. Of course, he thought. So again, the italics are what he's thinking. Of course, he thought, building up against an existing wall would save on materials. If you're just on the bottom of the ocean with water all around, then you would have to build 4 walls. But if you're up against a rock wall, then you only have to build 3 walls. So it would save time. Ash started placing glass blocks along. She must have glass blocks in her inventory. She started placing glass blocks along the underwater cliff. She had enough glass to create a single enclosed room. Okay, so now she has 4 walls. Well, 1 wall I think is the rock wall, and then 3 walls that are glass, and then a roof. Oh, no, it does not have a roof because it says it had no ceiling. Instead, it went all the way up to the surface of the water. This is interesting. This is going from the bottom of the ocean on the floor, the sea floor, all the way up to the surface of the ocean. And it has these 4 walls, the rock wall on one side and then glass on the other 3 sides, all the way up to the surface. That was risky because she had to swim up to where the phantoms could reach her. But it also allowed her to take gulps of air when she got to the surface. So when she got up to the surface of the ocean, she'd stick her head out and take a big gulp of air, but she had to make sure that a phantom wasn't diving down at that time. In a little while, she was done. She had built the structure around herself. So she's on the inside of it. So she was on the inside when it was finished. Morgan gestured at her through the glass. Okay, he tried to say, but of course he can't speak underwater. That's shelter, but it's still full of water. Ash would run out of air in seconds. Okay, so there's another problem to solve here. But before we see how Ash solves that problem, I wanted to show you what her structure reminds me of. It reminds me of an elevator shaft. So this is a diagram right here, an illustration of an elevator that goes up and down. And an elevator is going to be in this, kind of in a column with 4 sides that go from a low place up to a high place. And so she's on the inside of that, just like the elevator is. And the bottom would be the sea floor, the floor of the ocean, and the top would be the top of the water, the surface of the water. Here's another look at an elevator shaft that's round. And here's another illustration or diagram of an elevator shaft. Instead of kicking to the surface for another breath, Ash pulled out a white material. It was wool. Wool comes from a sheep. She began filling the interior with blocks of the fluffy white stuff. So wool looks like this. Okay, so this is in Minecraft, a block of wool. She must have had a lot in her inventory. It comes from sheep. So she was filling the inside of the shaft, the column that she made from the seafloor up to the surface of the water. She's filling this with blocks of wool, and she's also inside it as well. Morgan had no idea why she was doing that. Soon the structure was so full of wool that Ash had no room to move. Then she held up her flint. Now this is what flint looks like in the Minecraft world. We can also see it here, where it shows us her in her inventory and what she is using for crafting. Crafting is a word for making things, using what you have in your inventory. Now, flint is often used to, do you know what flint is used for? Flint is used to make fire. If you ever had if you're camping and you're trying to make a campfire and you don't have a lighter and you're trying to get a spark, you could try maybe using 2 rocks, and rubbing them together until it gets so hot between the 2 rocks that maybe if you put a dry leaf in there, all of a sudden the leaf would start to burn. But flint would be when you're striking kind of 2 things together and it's making a spark. And then that spark can be used to make a fire. But the spark would need to touch something really dry. Like, for example, wool. So she held up her flint. Now I want you to imagine what's going on here. She's made this structure. One side of it is rock and the other 3 are glass. So it kind of reminds me of an elevator shaft going from the bottom of the ocean up to the surface of the water. She has filled it with blocks of wool. She's standing in it. Now her purpose is to get rid of the water because this thing is full of water and she wants to get rid of all of the water so they have air. So it's dry air inside this structure. So right now it's full of water. So she's packed it with wool and then she takes out a flint, which is used to make fire. So, wonder what she's thinking. She struck a spark and the wool went up in flames. Ash, remember, was still inside the structure. So she was in the center of a roaring inferno. Inferno is what we call a really big fire. It just seems like out of control fire, like a huge fire. So this looks pretty scary, right? So what do we have to remember so that we, the reader, are not scared? While you're thinking about that, go ahead.
Ash is trying to let all the water in the wall and just use the fire to just like the wall is gone.
That's right. She's thinking that the fire is going to get rid of all of the wool, but also all of the water. And then what will be left is air. One thing I want to mention again is with British English, sometimes that ER at the end of the word gets flipped to an RE. But with American English, we would have ER. So center would look like this. I'm not correcting or pointing out all of the differences between the British English spelling and the American English spelling in this book. But something we need to remember is that they are wearing VR goggles, VR headsets. V stands for virtual, which means this is not really real. This is just virtual reality. This is just in a game. So they can't really get hurt. Like their real bodies cannot get hurt because they are in virtual reality world, not the real world. And in the Minecraft world, they have these health meters. So if, just like if a hostile mob, like a zombie, blows up, or like a phantom dives down, you can take damage and some of your hearts can disappear, and then you eat food and you get your hearts back again. So I would say being inside this structure, this elevator shaft looking thing that she made with fire all around her, she probably took damage. But we also have to remember that she will be okay. She's not actually going to be hurt at all in the real world. But Morgan is seeing this, and it's got to be kind of freaky, you know, to see this. Even if you know that you are in Minecraft world, it must be really difficult to watch your friend be in the middle of this structure with all of the fire. And Ash did it herself. This was her plan. This was her idea. She knew what she was doing. She was thinking of how to get rid of the water inside the structure so that they can have a place to be able to breathe while still being under the ocean. Morgan tried to scream her name. When he opened his mouth, however, no sound came out, only a rush of bubbles. Why? Because he's under the water, and you can't talk under the water. You also can't scream someone's name under the water. So we are going to be stopping here, although we'll read just enough to make sure that Ash is just fine, okay? So the beginning of chapter 6, it says, unexpected lab partners and other disasters. Well, if there are other disasters, then the author is implying that having an unexpected lab partner is a disaster too. An unexpected lab partner means if you are in science class and you are working in the lab doing an experiment, you get paired up with another classmate who's going to do the experiment with you. And maybe you always work with the same person. Unexpected would mean, what? I didn't think I was working with you. That wasn't the plan. I was not expecting this. And then when it says, and other disasters, that means they're calling the lab partner that's unexpected also a disaster. A disaster is kind of a disaster is a word that means this is not going according to plan at all. This is bad, in my opinion. Well, Harper was in full-on panic mode. She's like, ah! Ah! Even before Ash's avatar caught on fire. So remember, it's not Ash who caught on fire, it was her avatar. It's what she looks like in the Minecraft world. Despite the column of bubbles all around her, she felt like she couldn't breathe. What would happen to Ash if she ran out of health here? Harper hated that she didn't know the answer to that question. She desperately wanted to understand the science that made this place work, this Minecraft world that they are in through using the VR headsets. She swam toward Ash with a loaf of bread in her hand. It was all she could think of to do. But Ash waved her away, She was standing on the other side of the glass wall. The fire had burned away, and so had the water. Ash had created a shelter, a little pocket of air at the bottom of the sea, and she was still standing. She was okay. So Ash was successful in doing what they needed. They needed a safe shelter under the ocean, away from the phantoms, where they could breathe water. Ash had figured out how to do it. She knew that she had the inventory. She knew that she had enough parts in her health meter that would let her take some damage. And she did her plan, and she created a shelter that now gives them a place where they can breathe air under the ocean. But that was pretty exciting. So it is now time for us to say,
So long.
Cheddar Chip. Bye, Archie.